My name is David Ben-Ami, a former soldier in the Israeli army, and what I am going to share with you today is an experience that changed my life and shattered everything I thought I knew about God. I grew up in an Orthodox Jewish family, respecting every law and every commandment, believing that our tradition contained all the truth. But everything changed the day I saw death with my own eyes and had a near-death experience. What I discovered on the other side was beyond anything I had ever been taught. We have been lied to about God. The truth about Yeshua has been hidden from us, and today I can no longer remain silent. This testimony will shake up your faith and perhaps even change your life. Listen carefully until the end, because this revelation could be the key you are missing to understand the true divine purpose. I grew up in Jerusalem, in an Orthodox Jewish family where faith was the cornerstone of our existence. My father, a respected rabbi, constantly told me that the Torah contained the whole truth and that nothing should be questioned. Each day was punctuated by prayers, religious studies, and strict observance of the commandments. Early on, I learned to view the world through the lens of law, where every action had a spiritual consequence. I believed that our people were the only bearers of divine truth, and that anything that strayed from it was impure. I remember the long hours spent studying the Talmud, memorizing sacred passages and obeying traditions without ever daring to ask why. For me, faith was about obedience, not relationship. God was a distant judge, demanding perfection and discipline. Over time, this rigid vision of religion will take root in me, forging a dogmatic and uncompromising spirit. I looked with suspicion at those who lived differently, convinced that they were wrong. My whole life was regimented, every decision dictated by tradition. But secretly, a question tormented me. Why did faith seem so heavy to carry? Why were we serving God in fear and not in love? I did not dare express these doubts, for fear of being perceived as weak or unfaithful. My father often told me that those who strayed from the law ended in misfortune and perdition, and yet, deep in my soul, there was a thirst that the commandments could not quench. This religious discipline made me a zealous young man, ready to defend my faith at all costs. I grew up rejecting all other beliefs, convinced that we were the chosen people and that any other path was an illusion. I had heard of Yeshua, but only in negative terms: a false prophet, a deceiver, a threat to the unity of our people. Even his name was taboo in our house. All my youth, I tried to scrupulously follow traditions, believing that this was how one deserved divine blessing. But something was missing for me. Despite my obedience, there was a void, an absence of inner peace. Then came the age when you had to join the army. My father blessed me by exhorting me to remain faithful to God's laws, even in a hostile environment. Never let your heart stray from the Torah, he told me. With the conviction of a man who thinks he knows everything, I left thinking that nothing could shake my faith. But what I was going to experience on the ground was going to change everything. When I joined the Israeli army, I was convinced that I was serving a just cause, that I was defending my people as my ancestors had done. But very quickly, the reality on the ground shattered my certainties. There was nothing glorious about the war. It was chaos, fear, death at every moment. I saw my brothers in arms fall before my eyes, their lives snatched away in an instant, without explanation, without justice. The day Noam, my childhood friend, was killed, something broke inside me. He was a practicing Jew, devout in his faith, always praying and observing the commandments. However, a bullet hit him in the heart. Why did God allow such horror? Why were Noam's prayers answered? These questions kept running through my mind, and the answers I was given were no longer enough. It's God's will, some said. But what God could want so much suffering? I began to look around me and see the war through a different lens. Where was divine love in all this? Where was justice? I still prayed, but without conviction. The words I had recited since childhood sounded like empty, meaningless sentences. For the first time, I felt a dull anger towards God. If he was so powerful, why was he silent? Why did he abandon those who were faithful to him? Little by little, my faith crumbled. Having grown up thinking that following the law would protect me, I realized that life made no distinctions. Just or unjust, everyone died in the same way. I began to withdraw into myself, avoiding collective prayers, avoiding even thinking about God. What I saw every day revolted me. Wounded civilians, orphaned children, families destroyed by endless conflict. Was this really what God wanted? I had no more answers, only a growing void inside me. I could no longer talk to my father about my doubts. He would have told me that I lacked faith, that I needed to repent. But how can we still believe in a God who seemed so absent? At night, I tossed and turned in bed, haunted by Noam's face, by his unanswered prayers. My soul was at war, and I no longer knew where to find the truth. It was in this state of mind, lost and disoriented, that I was sent on a mission to a dangerous area, a mission that would mark a definitive turning point in my life. That day, we were on patrol in an area known to be unstable. The atmosphere was heavy. Each suspicious noise triggered a rush of adrenaline. Then suddenly, an explosion. A blinding flash, a deafening noise, and then nothing. Everything became silence and darkness. I felt my body collapse, but my consciousness did not fade away. I was there, and at the same time elsewhere. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer on the battlefield. I was in an indescribable place, bathed in a golden light, soft and soothing, which seemed to envelop me entirely. Absolute peace filled my being, a love so pure that words are incapable of expressing it. I knew I was not alone. There was a presence, a majestic, powerful presence, which seemed to read me like an open book. My entire existence flashed before me in an instant. I relived my childhood, my fervent prayers, my strict religious discipline. Then I relived the war, the deaths, the suffering, my doubts, my anger against God. And in that moment, a revelation struck me. My entire faith had been built on fear and obedience, but never on a true relationship with God. I had followed the law, recited the commandments, but I did not know the one I worshipped. My heart had always been closed. I felt an immense weight fall from my shoulders, as if, for the first time, I understood what it truly meant to be in the presence of the divine. Then a voice resonated, not with audible words, but directly into my soul. A voice filled with infinite authority, but unimaginable gentleness. You thought you knew me, but you only knew the law. These words pierced me like a sword. I was faced with a truth greater than anything I had been taught. The presence before me was not that of an implacable judge, but that of a loving, patient father, ready to welcome me despite my blindness. I couldn't speak or run away. I could only feel and understand. What I was experiencing at that moment defied everything I had been taught. It wasn't a dream. It was not an illusion. It was more real than life itself. I wanted to stay in this place, immersed in this perfect love. But deep down, I knew it wasn't time yet. Something remained for me to learn. Something that would change my destiny forever. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, I was pulled out of that light. A searing pain shot through my body. A scream tore my lips. I was back, at the hospital. My comrades told me that I had been pronounced dead on the battlefield before an inexplicable miracle brought me back to life. But I knew it wasn't a random miracle. It was a call to see the truth that had always been hidden from me. Lying on that hospital bed, still between dream and reality, only one question burned inside me. Who was this presence that I had felt? It wasn't just God as I had imagined him all my life. There was something more. Something that my religious upbringing had never allowed me to explore. Then, in the silence of my room, the answer came, not as a logical thought, but as a dazzling revelation. A voice, soft but powerful, resonated within me. You have seen the law, but you have not seen the heart. My whole body shivered. Then another sentence, clear, indisputable. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I remained frozen. I knew these words. They had been cited to me 1,000 times to prove to me how much of an impostor Jesus was. But this time, they did not come from a text, a theological debate, or a banned book. They came from the very presence I had encountered. I then understood Yeshua was real. He was not a lie, nor a false prophet, nor a rebel against our faith. He was the living truth. In that moment, all the teachings of my childhood collapsed in the face of this undeniable reality. It was not a human doctrine. It was not a philosophical concept. It was a person, a presence that transcended all understanding. A flood of emotions invaded me. First amazement, then disbelief, then an inexplicable peace. Everything I had been taught about God was incomplete. All my life I had followed a set of rules, seeking to earn His favor, but I had never known His heart. And now, faced with this revelation, I realized that what I had been searching for my whole life was not in traditions, but in a living relationship with Yeshua. I thought of these words from the prophet Isaiah that I had studied without ever understanding. Despised and forsaken by men, a man of sorrows and accustomed to suffering, He was wounded for our sins, broken for our iniquities. Isaiah 53:3-5. This passage was talking about Him, and we had ignored it. But how to admit it? How can I go back to my people and say, we were wrong? This truth, although liberating, was heavy to bear. Yet, deep down, I knew I couldn't go back. I had seen, I had heard. Lying could no longer be my prison. Then, in a breath, a whisper, for the first time in my life, I prayed differently. Yeshua, if it is truly You, guide me. And in that moment, I felt a fire burning inside me. A love, a presence that would never leave me again. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in this world, but something inside me had changed. My heart was no longer the same. The experience I had was not a dream or an illusion. It was a truth I could not ignore. 2 days had passed since the explosion. The doctors said I had miraculously survived, but I knew it was not a simple miracle. I had received a call to see the truth that had been hidden from me all my life. I was eager to share what I had discovered, but little did I know that this testimony would cost me everything I had known up to that point. When I spoke to my family, I expected skepticism, but never such violent rejection. My father, this man whom I had always respected, whom I had followed without question, became unrecognizable. His gaze, once full of affection, was filled with anger and disappointment. "You're possessed," he told me. "You allowed yourself to be corrupted by lies." He refused to listen to me. He refused to even hear the name Yeshua come out of my mouth. I tried to explain to him, to tell him what I had seen, what I had heard, but there was nothing I could do. My mother cried silently, unable to utter a word. As for my brothers and my childhood friends, they turned away from me as if I were a traitor, a renegade. In the army it was even worse. The whispers, the suspicious looks, the orders given coldly. I was no longer one of them. To them, I represented a threat. How could an Israeli soldier believe in Yeshua? It was unthinkable. Little by little, I was isolated. Then, one day, I was summoned. "We can no longer keep you in our ranks," an officer told me. "You have become a troublemaker." In an instant, my career, my future in the army, everything I had built collapsed. I had nothing left. No family, no friends, no mission. I should have been devastated. Yet in that moment, I felt freer than ever. Because even if the whole world rejected me, I knew that Yeshua accepted me. I thought about the words he had said to me. "You have seen the law, but you have not seen the heart." For the first time I saw the heart of God, a heart which did not reject, but which called, which restored, which liberated. And even though I was alone on earth, I knew that I was never spiritually alone again. But then, what to do? Where to go when everything that defined your identity collapses? It was at that moment that I understood that if God had revealed the truth to me, it was not only for me, but for those who also thirsted for light. Alone, rejected, without a clear future, I had only one certainty. I had to seek the truth, no longer through the traditions of men, but in the scriptures themselves. If Yeshua was truly the Messiah, then it had to be written, prophesied, announced. So I immersed myself in the sacred texts with a thirst I had never known before. But this time, I was no longer reading to confirm what I had been taught. I was reading to discover what had been hidden from me. And that's how I came across Isaiah 53. Despised and abandoned by men, a man of sorrows and accustomed to suffering, he was wounded for our sins, broken for our iniquities. The chastisement that gives us peace fell on him, and by his stripes we are healed. Isaiah 53:3-5. This passage shocked me. How could I have read it so many times without ever understanding its meaning? This suffering servant, rejected, humiliated, bearing the sins of the people. It was not a metaphor, it was a reality. It was Yeshua. He was the one the prophet spoke of, and we ignored him. My heart was beating wildly. The more I read, the more compelling evidence I found. In the Psalms, in the words of the prophets, everything pointed to him, and yet, all this had been hidden from us, as if a veil had been placed over our eyes. I then turned to my friend Eli, an army comrade who I knew to be a thoughtful man. I asked him a simple question. Have you ever read Isaiah 53? He looked at me in confusion. Like me, he had read it dozens of times without ever understanding its true meaning. Curious, he agreed to talk about it with me. Day after day, we studied together. It didn't take long before he too began to see. We were no longer facing a religion, but facing a living truth. But seeking the truth comes at a price. My name was already circulating among those who considered me an apostate. Some avoided me, others stared at me with contempt. Yet, deep down, I knew I couldn't go back. I had finally found what my soul had been searching for all my life, and now I had to make a choice. Keep quiet and live a lie, or move forward despite the consequences. Seeking the truth has a price. The more I spoke about Yeshua, the more the pressure around me intensified. In the army, my superiors looked at me with suspicion. Some comrades treated me coldly, others avoided me completely. Then came the moment when it was decided that I should be removed. I was transferred to a remote post, lost in the middle of the desert, as if they wanted to erase me, to silence me. But what they didn't know was that even in isolation, God was up to something. It was there that I met Abby, another soldier experiencing a deep spiritual void. He wasn't particularly religious, but he felt something in our faith was missing. He asked questions that I myself had begun to ask myself years before. Why do we serve God in fear and not in love? Why does faith seem like a burden and not a source of life? We started talking, exchanging. Little by little, I shared my discoveries with him. And instead of rejecting my words, he listened with a thirst that I recognized, the same thirst that had led me to this point. Together we studied the scriptures. We read Isaiah 53, the Psalms, the Messianic prophecies. As we advanced, a thrill ran through us. Everything was there, written before our eyes, but no one had ever taught it like this. The more we dug, the more we realized that Yeshua was not a stranger to our faith. He was the accomplishment. What I thought was an imposed exile turned out to be a divinely orchestrated time. But those who wanted to silence me did not intend to leave me alone. Soon, rumors began to circulate. I was accused of sowing trouble, of betraying my heritage. My name was mentioned in front of officers, and the order came down. I was to be expelled from the army. I was not given a choice. What I had sworn to defend, what I had built, was all taken away from me in an instant. But the hardest blow did not come from the army. It came from my own house. My father, this man whom I had respected so much, summoned me to his home for a final conversation. His gaze was cold, hard, and then he said the words I dreaded. "You are no longer my son." My heart sank. I knew it could happen, but hearing those words from my own father was an indescribable pain. He banished me from the family, disowned me in front of my family. I left that day with only one certainty. I had lost everything, but I had found Yeshua, and no one could take that away from me. Rejected by my family, expelled from the army, alone in the world. But are we ever really alone when we have found the truth? Even in my exile, I felt Yeshua's presence strengthening me. It was not an abstract belief, nor a simple intellectual conviction. It was alive. More than ever, I knew that what I had seen and heard was real. What if there were other people like me? Other Jews who, secretly, felt this same emptiness, this same need for truth? I then started looking, to talk to those who, like Abby, asked questions without ever finding satisfactory answers. Slowly, a small group began to form. It was not an official community, it was not a structured organization. They were simply souls in search of light, brought together by the same thirst for understanding. We would meet quietly, sharing scriptures, praying together, discovering what followed the Messiah. We were no longer bound by dead traditions, but by a living faith. But what we were doing was dangerous. Some had already lost their jobs, others had been rejected by their families, and we knew that at any moment we could be denounced. However, no one wanted to turn back. Once you taste the truth, there is no going back. Our clandestine meetings became moments of grace and power. We read the word as if we were discovering it for the first time. The Psalms took on a new meaning. The prophecies became clearer. Everything pointed to Yeshua. One day, a woman named Miriam joined us. She had heard about our group and came in secret. With tears in her eyes, she told us how, since her childhood, she had felt a deep calling towards something greater, but that everything around her brought her back to law and not to love. What if it was true? She asked us, her voice trembling. What if we had always been missing the truth? We didn't have all the answers, but we knew one thing. God was doing something new. We were rejected, persecuted, but we had never been so free. And we knew this was just the beginning. One evening, as I was walking through the streets of Jerusalem, immersed in prayer, I saw a familiar figure. My heart sank. It was my mother. She was there, standing, her gaze lost, her shoulders hunched by an invisible weight. For a moment, I wanted to step back. What was left for me to say to him? She who didn't have the strength to defend me when my father banished me. She who remained silent while my family rejected me. But something inside me pushed me to move forward. When she looked up and met my gaze, I saw something unexpected. Tears. Not tears of anger, but of pain, of confusion. She approached slowly and, in a barely audible breath, whispered, "I don't understand what happened to you, but I see that you have changed." Her face was marked by worry, but also by a curiosity that she could no longer hide. I was speechless for a moment. All these months I had prepared myself for hostility, for rejection, but never for this. I took a deep breath and told him everything, not in order to convince her, but simply to testify. I told him about my experience, the light, the voice, the indescribable peace I had felt. I spoke to him about Yeshua, not as a forbidden idea, but as a living, real person. She listened in silence, her hands trembling. In the end, she doesn't say anything, only a long sigh, as if a weight had just been placed on his soul. Then in a whisper, she said, What if it was true?" It was the first crack in the wall that separated us. She wasn't ready to accept everything, but I knew something inside her was starting to waver. The spark was there, and I understood that everything I had experienced was not only for me, but also for those I loved. That day, I did not find my family. I didn't get back everything I lost, but I saw hope. The hope that God, in His infinite love, had not finished His work. I lost everything. My name was erased from my family records. My old friends look away when they pass me in the street. The community to which I belonged no longer considers me one of theirs. In the eyes of the world, I am a broken man, a traitor to my own people. But I tell you with absolute certainty, it was worth it, for what I have found is more precious than everything I have lost. The truth is not always an easy path. It requires courage, it demands sacrifice, but it liberates. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. John 8:32. I had never understood these words before. Today, they resonate in me like a fulfilled promise. Yeshua freed me not only from human traditions, but also from fear, from doubt, from the weight of the gaze of others. I no longer seek to please men, but to walk with God. If you are seeking the truth, I encourage you not to be afraid. Don't let traditions box you in. Don't let others think for you. Search. Read. Open your heart. God is not a distant concept. He is alive. He calls you, just as He called me. It took me a while to understand this, and I don't want others to spend their lives in darkness when light is within reach. Today, my mission is clear. Share what I have received, bear witness to what I have experienced, and help those who, like me, feel that something is missing but do not know where to look. This path has not been easy, but it has been the most beautiful journey. Because at the end of the pain and rejection, I found perfect love. And you? Do you dare to ask the right questions? Do you dare to seek the truth, even if it bothers you? My testimony is difficult to hear, I know, but the truth often is. We grew up with ingrained beliefs without ever questioning them. But what if everything you were taught was incomplete? What if what you think you know about God is only part of the story? Dare to search. Dare to ask the questions you are forbidden from asking. Because at the end of this path, there is no fear, only truth and freedom. Now I would like to know, have you ever had an experience that transformed your faith? Have you felt this inner call that pushes you to search for something deeper? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to read it. If this testimony touched you, subscribe to the channel and enable notifications. There are still so many hidden truths to discover. And right here on your screen is another video that just might reveal something even more powerful. Watch it now.